Well, depth has won the Tampa Bay Lightning a couple of cups before. Can the depth guys on this year's roster do it again for 2026? We'll look at the depth players on today's Locked On Lightning podcast.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen of the day every single day. We are your free daily Tampa Bay Lightning podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we want to begin by shouting out our everydayers. Those of you who tune into every single show, every single day, we love you. We appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan, and I am joined by the giant pink flamingo to my Tampa airport, Greg Stephen. Greg, how's it going, man?
Good morning. Good morning. I love the flamingo over there at the airport. But look, killer football last night. NHL's coming up. It's a great day.
Yeah, we're in football mode lately. We're going to have to hard pivot here in about a month or so because this time 1 month from now, we'll be talking about the Lightning's opening game. So a lot to get through before then. We've been doing player previews all off-season long, looking ahead to some of the big storylines for next season for each one of our players. Today, Greg, we've made it to the end. The depth guys for 2025-26. These are the guys that aren't going to get the headlines, maybe aren't going to get the ice time or coverage time as some of the other players. We hope not, because if we spend a whole episode talking about one of them, probably it's not for a great reason. But Greg, depth is very important for Tampa Bay, and these are guys who are going to kind of make or break a couple of shifts.
Absolutely. I mean, look, some of these guys, they can be impact players, and I think with just a few tweaks to their game, they could have a big change, big game, great change for the future. And I think it's good to train these guys now and retool this roster on the fly. I think I'd rather them, kind of work these guys into the lineup the way they have been recently, instead of just kind of crashing when everyone turns 35 in 5 years,
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple of them on the back end first. And let's start with your buddy, Lilleberg. I know this is a guy who you haven't hesitated to call out for some of his mistakes, but somebody that you also think has a big upside.
Yeah, look, we've talked to Lilleberg a ton, right? And I think he is going to be great this coming season. I think this past season he was also great. Again, 104 penalty minutes is just too much. So we can clean that up. He's going to be great.
Yeah, 105 penalty minutes for last year. This is a guy that when I watched him play last year, first off, when I was doing research, I did not know that he almost hit 20 points.
Yeah.
Because I thought he was more of just kind of like the stay-at-home defenseman guy.
No, I mean, look, that's what I'm saying. I think he has that ability. I don't think he's, Hedman offensive, but
no.
I mean, 20 points is 20 points.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 goal, 18 assists. I mean, there is some puck-moving skill there. And, you mentioned, like, sometimes a young guy his age who's kind of gotten by on his, his whole hockey playing career by using size. Sometimes it takes a minute to translate, that size to the NHL level. It's not just going out there, throwing your body, being aggressive. The players are too good. They're going to, be able to figure out how to speed past that. That's where I think a lot of the stick penalties came in from last year because, Lilleberg couldn't necessarily, figure out how to just beat them straight up. Or maybe he was taken aback by speed a little bit. I think that's something that he got used to it as the season went on. You could see that games start to switch a little bit. I don't think he did bad at all. I think there's a lot of positives in his game last year. I think he did do pretty well defensively, all things considered. There's room for growth there, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I'm happy other than the penalty situation with how he did last year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I always have to check the roster to make sure I don't say anything crazy, but he might be a top 4 defenseman, right? Like,
I'll put it this way. And I was just thinking about this, if, like, let's say Eric Chernak gets hurt,
Right.
I would be comfortable with Lilleberg kind of stepping up and taking that role.
Me too. Again, with the discipline under wraps, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, some of the stick penalties are very silly. That kind of stuff, when you're an NHLer, that's got to go, right? I mean, occasionally guys make plays like that, but the one that really stood out to me was in the postseason. He just threw such a late hit. I think it was actually in the game they won, and it was at the very end of the game. It's just completely unnecessary to hit the guy, and very late. That kind of stuff is where you can tell he's young, right? Because an older guy knows the game's over, and you're not taking that hit. I mean, it is the playoffs. You want to be physical, but you also want to be smart about it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's talk about his defensive partner a little bit, and that's Darren Raddysh. We can keep saying like, oh, Darren Raddysh, one of the young guns.
Yeah.
He's 29 years old, so we're like, let's just call him a depth guy. This is a guy who, if you haven't heard of him, you'd probably be surprised by his stat line last year. Dude put up 37 points from the blue line. 6 goals, 31 assists, 37 points. Greg, what do you think of Darren Raddysh last year?
I mean, I would say I would give him a B. And here's why. I think he made a lot of just defensive coverage errors in my eyes. And 37 points, fantastic. I hope he keeps improving because, look, I mean, he started in 2022. He played 4 games and then 17 the year after. And then he finally played a full season with the Bolts. So it's not like he's been around a super long time up with the Bolts, right? So he's settling into his slot and his role. I think 37 points is great. Again, I want to give him an A. It's just you got to lock down the defensive game a little better, I think.
Darren Raddysh, if you're just judging based on the job you assigned Darren Raddysh to, yeah, he did his job. He went out there and was an offensive depth player, put a lot of points on the board, came in and sort of was that secondary power play guy. Yeah, if you're just judging Darren Raddysh on that, then you'd be like, yeah, he did his job. He did the job he was assigned. The biggest stat that stands out to me that maybe talks about his future a little bit, his offensive zone start percentage, 71.8% of all of his shifts at 5-on-5 start in the offensive zone. And that's not number one among defensemen. That's number one among all Lightning players from last year.
Wow.
He had a higher percentage of starts in the offensive zone than Darren Raddysh. And as
that's
you mentioned,
a cool stat.
Yeah, he's a defenseman, which makes you think it's like, okay, why aren't they trusting him with more shifts in the defense or neutral zone? Why are they picking and choosing where to start him? That goes to your point. That makes me think that maybe he doesn't have that full trust of John Cooper to really clamp down the game defensively. And, Greg, it's tough when you talk about a defenseman who scored 38 points from the blue line as maybe somebody who you could upgrade. But a couple of weeks ago when we did that show, and I was like, is there a veteran defenseman out there who maybe could fight for a spot? This was the spot I was talking about. And
right.
Again, like Darren Raddysh, great offensive player, I think leaves a lot to be desired defensively. And a player like that, 38 points aside, is a bit of a handicap for a team.
Yeah. I mean, his ice time even went down, right? Like the season before this past one, he had 19 minutes on average. And last season, he only skated 17 minutes on average. So you can tell they kind of were like, look, we can't have this hole in our defensive line, but he's great putting up points. So put him on their blue line.
Yeah. And I think I've used this comparison before. You know who he reminds me of a little bit? Marc-Andre Bergeron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All offensive vibes, cool player, cool guy. Not somebody you would put on the ice with 5, seconds left protecting a 1 goalie.
Right. Exactly. Or in like a tie game at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to talk forwards in a couple of minutes. Conor, Geekie, one guy that, is a big prospect for the Lightning that not a lot of people have been talking about this offseason. And then our old buddy, Zemgus Girgensons. What do we have what does he have in store coming in this year? We're going to talk both those players coming up in just 1 second. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL season is officially here. First week is in the books. We had an amazing slate of games. Great win by the Tampa Bay Bucks. Hey, FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it fits exactly the way I like to bet at any given moment. I can do player props. I can build a same-game parlay, or my favorite thing to do, jump into the action live as it unfolds with in-game bets. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We're back on Locked On Lightning. Nick Morgan alongside Greg Stephen. And Greg, we are talking depth players. Let's talk about some of the forwards, and let's talk about Conor Geekie. This is a guy that whenever you hear people mention about breakout candidates, players taking a big step forward next year, not a lot of people are talking about Conor Geekie, which is surprising because he's a former first-round pick, 11th overall from Arizona a couple of years ago, came over in the Mikhail Sergachev trade. He's 21 years old, going to stay 21 for most of the season unless they make the playoffs. This seems like a guy who you would circle as saying, okay, this might be the next big impact player, right?
Yeah. Look, he played 52 games last season. I actually did not have him playing that many games last season. I was surprised, and I thought he did well. Like you said, he's very young. He had 14 points in 52 games. That's a pretty strong start. Look, like he's never played in the NHL, right? Like this is kind of it. And I thought he did great. -4 is really not that bad for a first year young guy. 12 minutes on ice on average. Like I thought he did great. They did send him down, I think, like 60-ish% of the way through the season, right? I think they sent him back down.
You think he went down and then came back up towards the end of the. I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, he was down. He was back down for a while. I want to say it was like between 70 and the 70th and 80th percentage of the games, but
sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's probably a defensive liability a little bit. Like his two-way game, I think, needs work, and I don't even think that's necessarily a criticism. I think that's just being younger, right? Like, so yeah, I think next season, assuming it depends on how much time they plan to give guys like Pontus, right? Because you don't know what they're thinking as far as ice time and depth next season right now, but I would imagine we'll see him at least play 20-ish games, right?
Who, Geekie?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a guy that I think is a candidate to stay up the full season.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the biggest question is how do you envision using Conor Geekie? If he's a guy that you kind of see maybe being like a physical guy in the middle of the lineup, there's a spot for him right now. And I did see in the same way that I'll say, like, I saw improvement out of Lilleberg as the season went on. Towards the end of the season, you could see Conor Geekie kind of start to figure the fundamentals of being an NHL player out in terms of his positioning got a lot better. He was making far fewer puck mistakes. You could see he wasn't sort of, doubting himself. I think that's a big thing young players do is they're not intentional with some of their plays. I think that improved as the season went on. You saw that step forward from Geekie towards the end of the year. I think it's just a big thing. If the Lightning look at him and say, this is a guy that we can envision legitimately being a first line guy, somebody we can build around offensively. And I don't think that idea is far fetched. Maybe he does start in Syracuse as a first line guy there and build up some more offensive time. But if John Cooper looks at his skill set and said, this is somebody that's good enough that we can use right now, and then pick and choose some opportunities for him to really jump forward and take that next step, then yeah, I think there is a roster spot for him as the season begins. And again, he played majority of the games last year, so it's not far-fetched to think he's going to have that opportunity to come in and be a contributor from either the third or fourth line.
Yeah, and if I'm running this team, I'm putting him out there. To me, there are players that I don't know who, I don't want to like say it's one person or anything, but that the Lightning management values more than I do. For example, Mitchell Chafee is a guy that, to me, I wouldn't even have him on this team. So they roll him a ton, way more than I would. They put him on the power play for a while last season. Like, his value to them is much higher than what I see him as. And that's probably me, not them, right? But
yeah.
It's hard for me to see what he brings that like a guy like Geekie can't do. I just see Geekie as being a better Chafee, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And with some tweaks to his game, I just think right there is an upgrade. That's just like a 1-for-1 upgrade to me.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you at all there. And I'm kind of excited to see where he starts next year. Let's talk about our buddy Zemgus a little bit because this is a guy well known around the league for his defensive prowess, the pride of Riga, Latvia, the all-star game front runner for some reason, 8 years ago, if anybody remembers that whole storyline.
Yep.
Interesting year for Zemgus, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. His worst season offensively of his entire career. And he's never been an offensive guy. This is his first year away from the Buffalo Sabres. What do you think of Zemgus last year?
I thought he took a lot of criticism that I just didn't think he deserved, to be honest with you. I think his game switched a little when he came over to Tampa. I think I don't want to say that he was like a necessarily like a point contributor in Buffalo, but I would say he was more of a point contributor in Buffalo than he ever will be on the Lightning, right? The Lightning are so much more stacked than the Buffalo Sabres. So his role is obviously going to take a little bit of a dive as far as, ice time, production, things like that. That being said, he played all 82 games and he played them well. Like, I swear, fourth line guy, he was forechecking. When you watch this guy, he forechecks. Like, he went in there, he was being physical. He had his highest penalty minutes of his career. So I think that just shows his game. Again, use the word offensive lightly, but his game tweaked from like a little offensive to let's just dial this back and just be that physical, get on the puck, beat people up guy. And I think he really focused on that kind of role. And I thought that he played that role extremely well.
It's interesting that you said that you kind of think he's like a forechecking. Like, forechecking was his forte. Because I looked it up, and I was expecting when I looked at his ice time and his zone starts that he was going to be like the stereotypical, most of his starts came in the defensive zone or something like that, or he was like the defensive specialist. In the same way, more than 50% of his starts came in the offensive zone. And then it was close to 25-25 between neutral zone and defense. So, again, this is another guy who is not being trusted to kind of win faceoffs and win pucks in his own zone. But you're right. Like, there is a role for him, and he is really good forechecking. He's not bad at faceoffs. He's historically been one of the better faceoff guys in the NHL over the course of his career. This is a guy, and Yanni Gourde being on his line is also going to, kind of help. So yeah, there is a role there. I also, in that same vein, think that that's also a spot where maybe there's room for a young guy to come up and be a little bit more dynamic.
Yeah, I think leaving him in that aggression role is best for him in this team's format or structure right now.
Yeah.
I like what you said with Yanni being on his line, because Yanni brings that same fire. And maybe it's less that the Lightning don't trust him in the defensive zone and more that they want him to beat up the D in their own zone offensively, right? So I don't know if I'd necessarily criticize him in that way, but maybe it's definitely possible that they don't trust him too. Like it goes both ways, but -7, not a great sign, but also when you take 47 penalty minutes, kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that fourth line shapes up next year because you could see Girgensons there and you could see Geekie there.
And look, they added a bunch of other guys this past offseason too, right? Just a couple $1 or $2 million guys. So
yeah, you're gonna see Holmberg up there.
Right. You really just don't know what they're gonna do yet, but I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I mean, they have options there. There's definitely some new guys. Hey, and we're going to talk about some of those new guys on a future show. Holmberg, we have Peltier. Who are some of the guys that we think are going to make the biggest impact? That's coming up as we continue our season predictions. But we have more predictions coming up in this show, Greg. Of the 4 players we talked about, we're going to talk about who's a player that you think is going to take the biggest step up next year and who's a player that you're concerned might take a step back or be fighting for a roster spot as training camp begins, plus our biggest AHL impact player for next year. All that coming up in just 1 second. Welcome back to Locked On Lightning. Hot start. Can't talk today. Locked On Lightning. Nick Morgan alongside Greg Steven here with you today. Greg, we talked about 4 depth guys for next year. Let's make some predictions now. Of the 4 players we talked about, which are, if you're just joining, Darren Raddysh, Emil Lilleberg, Conor Geekie, Zemgus Girgensons, who's the player you think is going to take the biggest step forward next year?
I'm going with Lilleberg. I think he shows the most promise to me right now. I thought he showed me the biggest improvement last season, unless you want to make the argument for Geekie. Yeah, I'm going with Lilleberg. I don't think it's necessarily, again, like an offensive thing, but I think his penalty minutes will be at least halved. I think they'll definitely have worked that out of his game. And he's already been so strong defensively. I can only see that improving. So those two working in cahoots, it's going to be sick.
That was the player I was going to pick too. And I think the reason that I pick him over Geekie is just because I think there's more room for Lilleberg to kind of take that step forward. And not room as in like potential, room is just in, I think he's going to have the ice time in the specific situations that he needs to really showcase sort of his range. I think Geekie is going to be limited kind of by the players in front of him, you know?
Right.
We've talked about on the show, the Lightning are loaded at forward. Maybe one of the reasons that Isaac Howard isn't playing for this team right now. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be harder for Conor Geekie to find those moments to really be like an impact guy. I don't think that's the case for Lilleberg. I think there's going to be space for him to really be a star in the penalty kill. I think there's going to be a space for him, to kind of be sort of in that same vein as like, Ryan McDonough in his heyday, where it's just like, look, he's a defense first guy, but has the potential to be able to be an offensive difference maker in certain situations as like kind of the B guy. Mm-hmm. I think that potential is there for Lilleberg this season. And that's why I have him over Geekie as well.
Nice. Yeah. And I think of him as I like the McDonough comparison. I have him in my mind as like a speedier Chernak sort of too.
That's a good one too. Yeah. Like my point was somebody who has offensive skill, just maybe isn't necessarily like that 50-point guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's not Darren Raddysh. We say all this, and Darren Raddysh is going to get 50 points this year. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's in that same vein though. Let's talk about players that we just talked about that you maybe think are going to have a little bit of a step back next year, or maybe fighting for their spot at the start of the season.
To me, that's Geekie, and it sucks because I do think he's better than a lot of the guys. Like I've said, I think they would prefer him to dominate the AHL and maybe get him in for 20-ish games, because they just signed a bunch of guys that they want to probably test on those bottom lines. I don't see Gord not playing, so That's where I'm at. And again, I think it's a room thing, like you had just brought up. It's room on the roster, not room on skill ceiling. So that's where, again, forward depth too high. He's young. You build his confidence when he's young in the AHL. It's just how you do it. So I don't know. Maybe you could argue that like guys like Girgensons maybe not have a role, and Geekie's the one taking that, right? That's very possible. But again, Girgensons brings like this weird utility role that I don't think Geekie does. Geekie has more of just like the standard offensive production, right? So I just think that's more replaceable than the utility beat the defenseman up forechecker guy, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go Girgensons on this one, and that's just because I do think that there are players now on the team that I think can do what he did last year, maybe a little bit more effectively. We mentioned Yanni Gourde being there. That's a player that kind of fills that role perfectly. Pontus Holberg is going to come in on that fourth line, big offseason acquisition from Toronto, and he's going to shore up some of the two-way play back there. And that really frees, I think, somebody like Geekie to kind of step into that other role and maybe be a little bit more flexible how he plays, because now you have two really good defensive players kind of holding the fort on that line a little bit. It might not even be, as you mentioned, Conor Geekie. There could be some other players sort of on the fringe that are coming in and challenging the spot. We mentioned Jack Finley. That's a guy that the Lightning are really high on, and he's somebody with the body that I think really fits that fourth line vibe.
He's a big guy, right? He's like 6'5" or something.
Yeah, he is. Well, we'll talk about that when we talk about our AHL predictions, Greg. Yeah, but somebody like that, or if there's just somebody else hot in the AHL that you want to give a chance, if there's somebody sexy on waivers, after some of the rosters come out, if that you want to maybe just see what they can do. There's opportunity for there. So yeah, Zemgus might be fighting for a full-time spot next year. Not saying he's going to be like thrown on waivers or cut from the team or anything like that. He just might not be the everyday player he was last year when he played all 82 games.
Fair.
Yeah. All right. So let's turn our attention to the AHL now. Speaking of Jack Finley, we're going to be talking about an AHL guy who you think may be ready to make a big impact on the Lightning, or just somebody that you're excited to see take a big step in the AHL this year. So, Greg, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about prospects and official crunch predictions as the season, previews progress. But who's somebody that you have in mind right now?
For me, it's Crozier. Max Crozier. I think he could play on the blue line for the Lightning now. I thought he could have last season even. So I think he will see a larger role this season with the Lightning. I hope he does. He shows very strong defensive positioning. He's a physical guy. He's smart with the puck. He played 5 games for the Lightning last season, and he was even in all stat categories, which is fine, right? Like I'd rather that than him cough up 6 goals because he's fresh to the bolts, right? So yeah. I thought that he did great in those few games he did play. He did have one really just blown pinch coverage, but everyone on the team was doing that, so that's not a thing on him. And yeah, I'm going with Crozier. That's me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. There's a couple of players. You said Crozier, we said Finley. There's a couple of players that I think maybe are ready to take that next jump. For me, I'm looking at just somebody I'm excited to see this year on the crunch roster, and 2 names that stand out. One is Ethan Gauthier. This is a very highly rated prospect for Tampa Bay. He's a former 2nd-round pick of 2023. He got a little taste of AHL action last year when he joined the crunch roster after the Drummondville season ended. Played 3 games and then played in a playoff game. Didn't super stand out, but this is a guy with a lot of upside. Should be his first full pro year this year, and excited to see what he can do. The other guy, and this is kind of a wild card for me, but this is Dylan Gill on defense. This is a guy 7th-round pick from the Lightning a few years back. Not super highly rated by any means, but he had one of the wildest seasons last year. Remember, he actually played 24 games for the Crunch and then played for Moncton again after that. Was returned to Moncton. And when he did, his career just took off. Like he really saw another depth to his game. It's 6 goals, 18 assists in 27 games, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at his career numbers, that's like the best scoring rate he's ever been on in the
I mean,
juniors.
that's high for a defenseman in 27 games.
Oh, well, if you want scoring numbers that are high for a defenseman, in the Memorial Cup for Moncton, 3 goals. 3 goals in 4 games. And again, this is someone that before last year, his high was 8 in 68. This is not like a big scoring junior defenseman. And this is a guy that I think came in and after getting a little taste of AHL action last year, it wound up sort of melding his game to levels that we've never really seen before. So I'm excited to see what he can do back on the AHL roster this year. And again, not a highly rated prospect by any means. He may even be sort of a fringe guy from the Crunch this year, but I'm excited to watch him in camp and see, hey, maybe he can be sort of an AHL impact player after all, with how hot he got at the end of last year.
I love that. I love that prediction. I don't think I've heard anyone bring him up, so we'll see. Maybe, look, you could establish some big credibility as a reporter right now if this guy comes up.
Well, I'm not a reporter. I'm just shouting out nonsense into the podcast void right now. Yeah. Yeah, if there's a player in the AHL that you guys listening at home are most excited to see, let us know. Drop us a comment on the YouTube channel. Hey, a lot of big stuff coming up on Locked on Lightning this week. Speaking of prospects, we do have the prospect tournament starting on Friday. We're going to be talking about some of the prospects to watch for the Lightning this season, the top prospects, and we're going to be talking about that Howard O'Reilly trade. A lot of thoughts on that one, plus some fun stuff. We're going to talk about parity in the NHL, our favorite non-Lightning teams to cheer for, and much more as the season goes on. Guys, we're a month away from hockey, so stay tuned as we get this show up and running towards the regular season. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked on Lightning podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back with new shows tomorrow. We'll see you then.